All right, welcome. My apologies. I've had the COVID. It hit me kind of hard the past week, so I haven't made too many videos. Um, and I'll do playoff analysis of the Bruins and Wild at some point in the near future. But at the moment, I just want to talk about kind of the big news swirling in Boston, which is the Bruins are opting to keep Neely and Don Sweeney at least through next season, and it's kind of left open as to whether Bruce Cassidy may or may not be with the team next year. So just a few thoughts. I already did a video on Don Sweeney and like all of his moves and his draft picks and all that stuff. Um, my thoughts are very clear that Sweeney definitely needs to be replaced at this point. He's made a lot of really almost probably like 95% of his moves have been questionable. Um, I will give him credit in getting Hampus Lindholm this year. They really needed a left shot top line defenseman. Lindholm and McAvoy are great on the line together. But at the same time, at what cost? What did they give up? They might have given up a little too much rather than just drafting somebody and letting them come through the system. Is now the time to compete? I get this is the last it's the last hurrah with this core. The core wants to go for it, but at the same time, how much of the future are you giving up? The Bruins don't really have a farm system. It's very questionable. There's a couple prospects. Probably the biggest one is Fabian Lysell, who's currently playing with the Vancouver Giants in the WHL. He's playing very well. He was the first round pick, I don't remember what year, very recently. He's looking good, but other than that, the rest of the farm system is a bunch of unsigned college kids, which can work out very well. I think in terms of the players they've signed from college, they've done a good job. But at the same time, you're not getting those blue chip prospects, top draft picks that more chances than not pan out. So that's kind of my little rant, abbreviated rant on Don Sweeney. I think he's done a very, very questionable job. Again, I did a whole video. Check it out. There's no depth scoring as we've known all season. That was not addressed. No second line center. That was not addressed. That second line didn't do a whole lot in the playoffs. Not a huge surprise. Marchand and Bergeron were pretty good. But that's about the extent of it. DeBrusk had a good series, but didn't show up on the point sheet as much. So yeah, and there's God knows how many defensemen now. 9 guys that should be in the roster on any given night. 8 guys. Many of which are making $3 million a year plus. In almost the entire roster, with the exception of Bergeron and a couple other minimum contract guys, like Lazar, are all signed through next season. So you have to trade. You can't necessarily make any free agent moves. You have to figure something out. And they're pretty up against the cap, and depends what happens with Bergeron. If he decides to retire, I don't blame him, but at the same time, I expect him to be back next year in a Bruins uniform. But kind of the big news is Cassidy. They're kind of leaving that door open that they might part ways with Cassidy. You can go either way with this. There's good arguments to be had on both sides. I'm partial to letting him go, but to let him go, you have to let Sweeney go as well. You need to completely revamp that management system because it's clearly just not working. My supporting arguments for that are his lack of in-game adjustments, his his desire to stick with the same lines. Coyle was on that second line for over 40 games, and it did not work all season. It didn't. You got no production from Taylor Hall. You got no production from Pastrnak when he came down to that second line. You had no production from DeBrusk. Then all of a sudden you change it to Holla, and the second line's scoring at a decent rate. Pastrnak comes down, plays well. DeBrusk all of a sudden plays well. It's also, I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes because I'm just some random dude on YouTube. But there's some weird rifts Cassidy will have with players. Like Hollow was in the doghouse for a bit. DeBrusque was in the doghouse for a bit. I don't know. It's just like these guys who played the second half of the season at a very impressive rate. We're lucky to see 11, 12 minutes a game for the first half of the season. Not quite sure what that was about. So I'm not a big Cassidy fan. I think he needs to figure out defensive responsibilities. You have the leadership of Bergeron, which is nice in that line. And really the top two lines, a bunch of veteran guys, they know how to play that style of defense. And on the third line with Charlie Coyle, they can rotate and they know how to play responsible defense. But at the same time, when lines are changed, there's no real structure when it comes to who has the defensive responsibility. If McAvoy's driving up in the zone, who's taking McAvoy's spot on the back end? And we've seen that a lot this season with the Bruins, with really before Hampus Lindholm got here. And Hampus Lindholm has been great. He's had to deal with a lot of 2-on-1 breakaways in his short time in Boston. But you get McAvoy driving up the ice, and oftentimes he's paired with like someone like Mike Riley or whoever, Grizzlick, who also like to drive up into the zone and support, meaning there's no one back for defense, and there's been a substantial number of breakaways against Boston this year. So just to kind of summarize it, I don't think Cassidy is the ideal coach for the Bruins. At the same time, you have to make the argument that what can you do with the roster he's had? Obviously, he's played around with it a little bit, as every coach you expect to. Foligno making $3.9 million, spent some time on that second line, played a couple games on the first line with Bergeron and Marchand. It's not, the scoring isn't there for Foligno. At this stage in his career, he's more of a physical veteran presence, which is kind of what you should be expecting, which is why the contract is questionable. So he's kind of found a home on that fourth line, but at the same time, that team isn't built to win a championship. It's not. You can't make that argument. You can try. Go ahead. I challenge you. You can't. The Bruins, the way they are currently built, are not a championship team. So, with that being said, what does Cassidy necessarily do? There's only so much he can do. I do give him credit with the defensive pairings. He has switched a bunch on the defensive pairings. Hasn't really had much success with that, and that's not Cassidy's fault. That's just, some players don't play up to their expectation with certain partners, and that's all right. That's just the nature of hockey. I don't necessarily blame Sweeney for that either. I think it's a tough, you don't really know until they're playing together type thing. But, it's just like, I get if they part ways with Cassidy. I get if they keep Cassidy. It's not like, it's not really, you're talking about a few wins in either direction, honestly. Cassidy's had some great moments, and he's had some pretty rough moments throughout the season. But, to summarize, the change needs to come from Sweeney. 100% needs to not have a job with the Bruins organization next year. And Neely probably has to go too. I don't know much about what Neely does day in and day out, but I can tell you that he's in charge of Don Sweeney's future, and Sweeney's been the GM for, I think we're just hitting 7 years now, this month, or maybe next month. Might be next month. Regardless, 7-ish years, with subpar drafting, subpar signings, subpar trades. There's been no positives from the general manager position. And 7 years in, there's been no changes to that position. It doesn't look like anything that's being conveyed to Don Sweeney has actually taken effect. So that's just my 2 cents with kind of the organization and how it's going. Last little side note, the Jacobs family, which owns the Bruins, tends to be very hands-off with the team. There really needs to be a glaring issue, like they're not making money. That's got to be the issue with the team. And until then, they're not going to do a whole lot. That's what happened with Chiarelli and Claude Julien. the sellout streak ended, they weren't making as much money as they once were a few years ago, even though ticket prices were substantially going up at that time. So, I think, and I've said this from the beginning, as a Bruins fan, it hurts to say this because you never want to see this of your team, but I think they need to miss the playoffs for a year. I think they need a reality check. I think the Jacobs family needs a reality check. I think Sweeney, Neely, and you can make the case for Cassidy. Cassidy, to me, is like, he's disposable. You can go out, you can find another coach who will do a similar job to Cassidy. Might be a little worse, might be a little better. I'm not saying Cassidy's a bad coach, but the Bruins need some type of change and a reality check, because what they are doing is clearly not working. So hopefully it doesn't take missing the playoffs for the Bruins management to figure that out, because it's not fun hockey to watch. Honestly, I want to see my Bruins win a championship, but they need some type of reality check. They need to make some major changes within the organization, not just with the management structure, but the team as a whole. You have to address your abundance of defensive players, two of which are excellent, and the other like 6, 7 are all right. Maybe like second, third line pairings, mostly third line pairings on any other team. So that's it. I appreciate the rant. Obviously, like, this is highly debatable and it's obviously open for discussion. This is just my 2 cents, my thoughts, my opinions up until this point. After watching the season, after digging into Sweeney's tenure with the Bruins, his draft picks, his moves, all that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with keeping Sweeney? Do you think they should keep Cassidy, fire Cassidy? Does it start with Neely? Does Neely need to go? I think at this point, his job is, he's a manager. He should be managing his employees, and he's clearly not up to the standards of Bruins Nation anyway. So let me know what you guys think. Appreciate you watching, and yeah, I'm going to try to bang out more videos just because I really have a lot to talk about, and playoff hockey's a thing that's been happening, and but I've been feeling a little rough from the COVID. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Take care, and let me know what you guys think. This is one of the interesting discussion topics that could just be a lot of fun. So all right, take care.